Good morning, everyone. Welcome to back to the spring semester of Finance 101. These lectures are coming in rapid succession here. The lectures today are going to be live streamed and recorded, so you can do your homework at home. All the materials are also posted and available on board docs. After the presentations, the chat will be open for community comments. But we'd like to get through the entire presentations first. So I'll invite you all to open your textbooks to chapter 4. And while you're doing that, I'll give you a brief primer on the first 3 sessions in case anyone missed them. Chapter 1 was the audit report. The take-home message from that is there was about less than 1% left over at the end of the year. That was put into the capital reserve, and that's going into the Bala-Kin Road roof. Chapter 2 was the revenue side. Take home from that is the Act 1 index is 4%. That's again set by the state, although the district, due to some large commercial real estate assessments down, is only going to realize about a 3% increase in revenue. Chapter 3, which was last meeting 2 weeks ago, we talked about the non-instructional expenses, which is a relatively small but not insignificant portion of the total budget. Critical features there worth highlighting is that there are some very real expenses which are increasing far beyond the 3% in revenues. We talked about, in particular, contracted transportation, and that's going to be 50% more in the coming year than it was last year. And that's not 15,000 versus 10,000. That's over $5 million, which is an increase over 3.3. So this is real dollars, folks, we're talking. This is a $1.7 million increase over 1 year. 3 years ago, 2002, contracted transportation for children with special needs was only $2 million. Now it's over 5. So, if we're getting 3-4% increase every year and services like that are going up 50%, this is a not sustainable trajectory. The solutions for which are going to have to come at some point through Harrisburg. So it's just an example of the particular challenges that the administrative team is facing this year. So you will see how some of that's going to be addressed in the presentation today, chapter 4. So at this point, I will turn it over to our professor in residence, Mr. Orlando. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So as Mr. Reike mentioned, so today we're talking about the second part of the expenditure side of the budget. So we'll talk about the staffing and personnel, which obviously makes up the bulk of our expenditures. We'll talk about the instructional and the extracurricular programs, as well as student services, and we have various administrators will go in detail to those different areas. As we mentioned in the past, the 25-26 budget overview is the educational financing plan for the children of Lower Marion, and it supports our extensive curriculum and learning community. And as all school districts, we're required to comply with the accounting charts of accounts for local education agencies. So you'll see they're broken out between function and objects on the expenditure side, and we'll highlight some of the major drivers and what's impacting the budget in these particular areas, and then we'll go into the largest part, which is the salaries and benefits. So let's just kind of go to the next slide, which you saw last time. So on the left-hand side, this is what's called the functions. So that blue 1,000 instruction is what we're going to talk about today. And then under the support services, we'll talk about the 2,100, which is the students, the 2,200 is instructional staff, and also 2,400, which is the pupil health. In addition, then we'll close out with the 3,200, which is the student activities. And you can see the chart, how the percentages look out. So you can see 58% of the budget goes for instruction. So you can look at one way, it's 58 cents for every dollar basically going for the instruction for the students. And you can see the total right now is $339,176,904. That's as of today. And again, it's subject to change as we continue to refine the budget. The next slide breaks it by object. So you can see on the left-hand side, objects 100 and 200 make up 77% of the budget. So everything else, 300 through 900, is 23%. a lot of that is mandated and is really not a part of our control, whether it's regulations or laws that require us to do different things, also our debt service obligations and so forth. So we talked about that last time. So let's move on to the next slide. So we talked about what are some of the factors that are impacting the 25-26 budget. I think Mr. Reiki mentioned before, we were talking about the revenue side, we were talking about property reassessments. So we've seen a couple different things. One is demolition of some major properties that obviously reduced our revenue. At some point in time, they'll be hopefully redeveloped some years down the road, but that doesn't help us out for this 25-26 budget. There have been a lot of reassessment or assessment appeals on some large commercial properties that had a negative impact on our revenue for this upcoming 25-26 budget. Interest income and investment returns are declining. So I think we talked a few when we did the revenue side, how we were earning well over 5%. Now we're in the 4% range. And I don't ask me about the tariffs that are going to happen. This morning I heard from a financial report that maybe the Fed is now contemplating 4 cuts between now and the end of December. Last month there was no cuts, so it keeps changing, evolving. So that's the kind of volatility we're dealing with right now. So we'll have to hopefully the investment returns don't decline further than what a lot of the investment bankers have been predicting, which is what we're using for our budget. But we'll see what happens with that. Higher costs due to inflationary factors. I don't think anybody tell anything new with what's happening in the world today with different tariffs that potentially may be implemented and so forth. That's having an impact on us, particularly a lot of our technology devices come from overseas and so forth. So we'll have to see how that's going to impact just in general higher costs that have been happening. Increase in mandated programs. I mean, every year we have an increase in mandated programs. So it's just a little bit higher, as Mr. Reiki mentioned. Some of the specialized transportation services up, dramatically due to the needs that we have to provide. Increase in personnel costs. Personnel costs increase annually anyway, but we're seeing a larger increase in benefits we have historically, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So early in the process, this is what led to a $5 million gap between our anticipated revenues and expenditures, which required budget refinement. And budget refinement occurs every year as part of the budget process. So this is nothing new. The refinement, every year we look at requests from departments, we review them, we look at maximize our resources, we prioritize what the needs are. So this happens every year. Now this year, like in past years, we've seen a more in-depth refinement due to the decline of revenue, which we haven't seen. I think we mentioned before, our assessed values have been increasing for, well, the last decade. Now we're seeing that decline, which has led us to a more in-depth refinement. But the refinement to address the $5 million gap, that's already factored into the $339 million budget. So that's already been factored in. So that's for sure that's where we're at right now. And I'm going to turn it over to.
And thank you, Mr. Orlando. And thinking about the gap between expenditures and revenue, we looked at every part of the organization and some scheduling modifications that, in collaboration with administrators all across the district, we came up with changing 6 half days for students into full student days, allowing for more instructional time. To be clear, that would be, we currently run with 6 half days, and that would be changed into 3 full student days and 3 full professional development days without students, which we think is a win on a lot of levels. High school testing days will have regular scheduled transportation times only, as opposed to multiple bus runs on those days. The district will maintain after-school late buses, but will reduce the number of runs. A single late bus run will occur at 4:30 at the middle school level and 5:30 p.m. at the high school level on Monday through Thursday. Because of low ridership and fewer after-school activities and a high frequency of games scheduled on Fridays, late bus runs on Fridays would end. Thank you.
All right, so it's over to me to talk about the personnel piece of the budget, which is, as we've described in the prior episodes of this journey, the largest portion of our budget. And I think I've used this slide year over year to remind the community as we think about our organization. Often we're thinking about the teacher in the classroom, but we run a pretty complex business here. In addition to, we've talked about the transportation system that delivers students to over 100 schools, not just the 11 in our district. We offer, school breakfasts and lunches every day, which is tantamount to operating 11 restaurants across our district. We provide health services not just in our schools, but to private schools within our community. So there are a lot of different, I would say, industries within a public school system that we staff, and largely the majority of our staff are our employees, and we have very few contracted services that deliver direct services to our students. So I like us to think about the complexity of our work when we think about the personnel. And because we are a service-based industry, like all public schools are, we're driven by staff and to meet the needs of our students and our community. As you can see, just if we think about the students in our district, we have over 8,500 students. We have roughly 17,000 parents, guardians, and over 60,000 residents. So again, we're operating not just to serve the students in our buildings, but we serve a community as well. When we think about the facilities and the availability of those to our larger community involves the resources of our human resources to open those buildings and clean those buildings and turn lights on and turn air conditionings on. So again, thinking beyond just the school day, we do offer a number of services for the larger community. And just thinking about the different physical locations, not only do we have schools, we have buildings that our operation teams, technology teams run, and so we have thinking about the land itself and our grounds crews that maintain all of our outdoor spaces, again, for the benefit of the larger community. Next slide. So again, within the district itself, not only do we have professional staff positions, and I talked about teachers in classrooms, we have psychologists, school nurses, speech therapists, a number of different roles that support different types of student needs. We have support staff positions that serve in our classrooms, such as instructional aides, and also the supportive staff within our school buildings, secretaries, custodians. We know how critical those roles are to support our operations and our families, our drivers, aides on buses, technology staffs. Again, different types of roles, administrators, principals, assistant principals, central office staff, et cetera. And then a few other employment categories that I wanted to note that also become part of that personnel budget, which are coaches and activity sponsors. Often there are regular employees, but sometimes they are individuals that support those activities after school and have a day job somewhere else, not just in our classrooms. We have temporary and seasonal employment, as well as I mentioned, some independent contractors. Our substitute service, other than we have building-based subs that work, that are employed throughout the year, we do have a substitute service that supports our district as well, not to mention the volunteers that make sure that where we have some gaps, that they can fill those gaps for us as well. So next slide. As Mr. Orlando mentioned, this year, as every year, we look critically at what the needs are, what our resources are, financial and otherwise, and things like enrollment, district priorities, and engage in that budget refinement process. This year, we are not looking to add any staff and have, again, made some adjustments and refinements to our staffing across the district in light of again, student needs, our available resources, and enrollment. To the extent that there are adjustments, as we have always done, we work to notify the staff that are involved, and certainly to the extent that any of those changes impact students and families, those families are contacted directly from us or by us. As we do those refinements, as I mentioned, we look at things such as enrollment, but this is a list I've taken deeper dives into in prior years, but just to get a sense of, there are formulas that work to identify or help us identify what the needs are related to personnel. We have state guidelines, for example, that dictate what our special education staffing, what our gifted support staffing needs to look like. We look at industry standards in terms of our custodial and maintenance personnel and the ratios that are appropriate for the needs of our facilities. Drivers, obviously, the number of routes and students that we need to transport will dictate to some degree the number of drivers that we need, and we don't always get as many as we want, but we are making great strides, or have made great strides in fulfilling those driver needs. I know we've talked a lot about that over the last few years. So this list is identifying some of those areas that we look at and seek to make sure that we are meeting needs based on these requirements, et cetera. Next slide, please. Back to you, Vic, I believe.
So this file here slide is showing what the anticipated salaries and benefits are for the year. So you can see the 100s are all our salaries that Ms. Schaefer talked about. The benefits, which we'll go a little bit later, include all the 200s. And we'll go highlight some of the major benefits that we have. So there's that $260 million. So you can see over the years as personnel costs increase, they go up every year. And then here we're going to talk about the benefits. So 30% of the total expenditures is related to our benefits. And under the state, we're required to pay into the employment retirement. The Pennsylvania School Employee Retirement System is a rate that every school district has to pay. The board certifies it in the December of the preceding year. So in December of #24, the board certified and said, okay, school districts, for every dollar you have to pay 34 cents into the system. So there's a 34%. The current year it's 33.9%. It's going up marginally to 34%. It is projected to increase over the years as we get further along. Healthcare is the one I mentioned before. That's the one we've seen a little larger increase than historical. So we're about a 9% increase roughly in healthcare this year. The last few years we've been in that 6 to 7% range. Probably I'll call it the pre-COVID area. We were substantially less in that 2% range, 3% range. And again, our healthcare costs are driven by the claims. So as claims increase or people go to the doctors or take more prescriptions, that cost increases. We are self-insured through the Montgomery County Consortium for healthcare. And then Social Security is what every employer is required to pay for their employees.
Thank you. This represents our instructional programs, and 127 million. You see the large percentage of that is salary and benefits, which has been covered multiple times through this presentation. The other area is about $8.1 million, and if you look at the pie chart on the right, it breaks down where that money comes from. So the big areas I will cover, you see the vast amount of that, 78%, is supplies, which we'll break down a little bit further in the next slide. But there's professional and technical services, which are contract services largely, and other expenses. On the next slide, you will see how the large percentage is broken down. And supplies is what you traditionally think of classroom supplies. There's paper, there's pencils, and with this large machine that makes up teaching and learning, that represents 1.1 million of the things that you see in the classroom, those tangible things to run a science experiment. Books are books. You see the number there. And technology in a tech-driven world is $3.8 million. That encompasses the MacBook Airs that we have at the high school level, the Chromebooks and the iPads we have at the lower levels, and a large percentage of that technology area are the devices, along with other things that are broken down into there. Next slide. So to highlight there's a lot of things that go into those areas, but I wanted to highlight the major budget drivers for curriculum and things that we're focused on this year. The state has introduced new science standards called PA Steel standards implementation that we're excited about, trying to make science more functional, almost like we did with integrated math, how instead of algebra, geometry, and algebra 2 in isolation, those things are mixed together. So a little highlight for Pennsylvania Steels, but to implement a new curriculum, there are new resources that have to go with that. If you've been paying attention to the last board meetings, we've also implemented middle school math to a high level, and we're going to move to elementary so that they remain budget drivers. In the next 3 rows, you will see high school, middle school, and elementary. And there's robust curriculum all across a K-12 school district at every level. For example, at the high school level, you have upwards of 200 plus courses. So we try to maintain them on a cycle for fiscal reasons, and also so teachers can handle curriculum changes in a cycle and get used to a curriculum. So they are the major ones that are listed here. And at the bottom, you'll see summer programs. And if you were at our October CCOB meeting, or you want to look back into the files, you can see all the vast summer programs that we offer, that we look to maintain, and learning doesn't end when the traditional school year ends. Next slide. And so the top row, the 1300 series, is our vocational education. That is mainly Central Monco Technical High School. And you will see from 2021-22 till now that number is risen. That is both due to the fee increase, but also we'd like to think more students are interested in career and technical programs, and we're highlighting them in our high schools. Currently, we have 68 students in the program. And the bottom chart table is 1400. That is largely our summer programs. Embedded in there also would be things like dual enrollment, homebound instruction, and other things that happen outside of traditional school day as we think of. And we'll go to the next slide.
Good morning. So first we'll just talk about special education programs. As you see, like the other areas we've discussed today, our staff salary and benefits makes up the largest portion of our budget. Under that includes our special education teachers, our gifted support teachers, instructional aides, behavior aides, job coaches, as well as our speech and language therapists. So they're included in that. And then under the other objects, the 300 professional services, those are IU services, so Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. We use some services from Chester County Intermediate Unit, Bucks County, and Delaware County as well, depending on student need. And that would be related services, hearing, vision, orientation, and mobility services, and then also IU programs for classroom placements for students who might need placement outside of the district. Under the 500 other services, that's where you're going to see the out-of-district placements for students who are in non-IU programs. So those would be like our approved private schools. You'll also see there like our contracted services. So we utilize contractors for our other related services, occupational therapy, physical therapy. And also within that are our charter schools, our responsibility for students who are identified with disabilities requiring special education, and the district costs that we have to pay for those are included. And then the 600 for the supplies would be like your instructional materials. And we'll go into these a little bit further. One thing that's important to note is that the students receiving special education services continues to increase every year. As you look at these numbers, it accounts for students who are entering and exiting special education services, and we still continue to see an increase. Over this span of time, you can see it's an additional 279 students from 2021 to 2024. What's important about that is like there's a student behind every number. and every student requires individualized supports and services that we're responsible for meeting. Our students requiring placement outside of district schools, our teams work really hard to provide services within our schools, but there are some times that student needs exceed what we are able to provide with our district programming, and we need to look at out-of-district placements. You can see we're staying very close to that 3% across the years, but of course, as your numbers increase, that, you know, your numbers of out-of-district placements increase. From that same time span, from 2021 to 2024, in just 3 years, that's 18 additional students. And so that number, 3%, is 3% of all identified students are in out-of-district placements. The state target is actually 3%, so the district does a nice job meeting what the state target is for that. But again, I would highlight behind everyone, behind that number 55, is a child who needs individualized supports and services based on their disability. Special education is driven by mandated services per federal and state regulations, and so we're required to meet those. A free and appropriate public education is required to be provided for every student identified with a disability, and that means that we provide services at no cost to families. The decisions about programming and supports and services happen at an individual IEP team level. So individual IEP teams that know the students, that includes the student's parent or guardian, are making decisions based on what's best for that student, and teams can't make those decisions based on cost. We're required to make those decisions based on what individual students need. Another driver that continues to be in place, we talked about this previously, PDE's policy change that extended our requirement for providing a free and appropriate public education for eligible students from the age of 21 to the age of 22. For students that are staying to the age of 22, those are your students with the most extensive needs, requiring services up until adult services. We also continue to see an increase in related services costs and expenses. Someone had mentioned like market-driven prices, like we see the same thing happening with that. The charter school costs are a significant impact. As we've talked about, we have a required amount that we pay. We don't control who is enrolled in the charter schools. Parents have the right to enroll their child in a charter school. Charter schools are required to report to us if a student is identified, but we don't get any additional information beyond that. In particular, we've seen an increase in this area because we just have seen an increase in the number of students who are identified in charter schools. So from last year to this year, it's actually an increase of a little over $700,000 just in 1 year based on enrollment, which fluctuates. We had for a while been staying around 14 special education students in charter schools, and now we're up to 18, 19. And again, we don't have any control over that. Parents have and guardians have the right to enroll in charter school. We also see an increase in tuition costs and expenses. So when you think about those out-of-district placements, we generally see an average of 3% increase. It depends on the individual entity and what they determine they need to continue to provide services to students. Some of those federal and state requirements include what's called pendency, which means a student's pendant placement. The IEP that parents have approved, that was last approved by the parents, is required to stay in place until the team decides otherwise. So if tuition costs go up, the student still stays in that placement because it's legally required as their pendant placement. Tuition costs range. Your IU programs tend to be a little bit less typically, depending on the specialized nature of the program. And then you could see all the way up to over, six-figure numbers for tuition costs only. That does not include related services. So on top of tuition, you might see a student might need one-to-one support, might need a one-to-one nurse, extended school year services, which are services that happen outside of the typical school year, are all additional costs. And transportation is not included here. I mean, Aldous did a nice job explaining the transportation costs, so that is additional costs beyond what you see here.
If I could just make one note, I think Ms. Fraser brought up the point about the tuition costs. So when a student is in a placement, we're basically at the mercy of what the increase the school wants to charge. We have no control over it. So even though it's been 3 to 5%, they could come back next year and say it's 6 to 10%. We're required to do that. So it's out of our control, just to make that note.
And we wouldn't, again, like back to that, you're required to provide what's the student requires. So we wouldn't say you have to change placement because the cost is increased too much. The student's required to be able to stay in that placement if it's appropriate. Thank you. This is still me. So this is support services. So this reflects our clinical and our counseling departments. As you can see, we actually are a higher percent in this area that is salary and benefits. So 96% of our budget goes towards our highly qualified staff. These are our counselors, these are our social workers, and our school psychologists. As you look there for our professional services under these, and we'll talk about each one, but your professional services are going to be IU evaluation support under the clinical, PSATs that we offer for our 10th and 11th grade students. You'll also see there some other under the 500. If students are court adjudicated or placed by outside entities, we still have to pay for the educational portion of that placement. So we have to account for that within the budget. And then you also see there like our supplies, which we'll talk a little bit more about, but those are things needed for the evaluation process as well as counseling supports. And we'll talk about each one. So this is just each one broken down by your counseling versus your psychological services. And the only thing I would just note specifically there is you can see that there's very little increase. We've worked really hard to try to maintain our costs where we can. So where we see our increase, of course, is with our salary and benefits with our staff. For our clinical services, again, these are our school psychologists, we have our social workers, and we also have some contracted support. These are team members who are highly qualified in very specialized areas of expertise. When you think about the work that our school psychologists, our school social workers, and our counselors do, it's highly specialized. They're direct student and family support. So our families feel this level of support directly from these individuals. And again, it's important to have highly qualified staff because it then leads to the quality of services that we are able to provide to our families. It is also tied to federal and state mandates. You've heard me speak publicly before about our child find responsibility. The district is responsible to identify, locate, and evaluate any child with a suspected disability through the age of 22. So that includes students that are in our schools. That includes students that might be district residents, but parents have elected to enroll them in a private school. So families have the right to request an evaluation through the district to determine if their child is eligible and if they'd be interested in enrolling in the district. So that all occurs with the evaluation. And so a large part of the work that the psychologists in particular do are the evaluations of students, which is really looking at making sure that we're identifying students with disabilities, and for each of those children that we've identified every area of need so that IEP teams can address those needs. It is important, these are also critical crisis response team members. So when we talk about risk assessments, threat assessments, really providing response when there is any level of crisis, which can be minor to more significant, these team members are often right at the forefront of that work in supporting students and families and staff through that. So when you look at the overview of our counseling in particular, the salaries. The one thing I would point out here is in addition to salary and benefits, we also do have work that needs to be done in the summer to help prepare for the school year. Ideally, students are able to walk in the first day and really be set up for success and set up with their schedule and the supports that they need. So we do provide days in the summer for counselors if they elect to come in to do work. We allow that, so that's in addition, that's within the salaries amount. I mentioned before about the purchase professional and technical services. I mean, here it's just important to note that we have a historical practice of offering PSSATs at no cost to families for 10th and 11th graders. That's an approximate cost of about $27,000 that we do for families. And then our supplies, these are really critical supplies. We have a PA state guidance plan. There's Act 339 that puts requirements in place for what our counseling program provides. That includes college and career readiness that starts in kindergarten. So Cooter Galaxy is a career readiness developmentally appropriate for elementary students that we use K to 4. And then Naviance, which we've talked about before, also supports then students with college and career readiness. So these are technology supports that are critically important. Cooter's around $8,500. Naviance is around $13,000 to give you an idea of those costs. And then for our psychological services, in addition to our district staff, we have more work from an evaluation standpoint than can be covered by our current staff, and so we always need additional psychological services. We get those through an intermediate unit. They're able to help us do the overflow for evaluation support. Because of the level of need, that's around $141,000 that's required to be able to support that additional need. Along with that, like supplies from psychological services, technology resources for the evaluation process, so it's like your scoring and your test protocols. We've joined a consortium through the intermediate unit that's allowed us to significantly reduce that cost a couple years ago, but that's around $36,000. And then the general supplies, there's still some old school handwritten protocols too that we have, and that's around $15,000. So those are additional costs for psychological services.
Thanks, Kimberly. A large overview, the first slides I shared were supporting teachers and buildings who support students. If you would look at this range, the 2200 series, supporting the curriculum office and central office to support the teachers and the buildings who support the students. Again, large percentage, a trend throughout all of this is salary and benefits, and the other objects making up a little bit less than $1 million are in the chart on the right. Most of that again is supplies, and these are professional books and software licenses and other things that support teacher training and professional development that support the students. Next slide. And here it's broken out in 3 specific areas: our library services, our curriculum team, as you can see in the middle, who again are supporting the buildings. A lot of times we look at this as when we're purchasing things for buildings across all levels, that usually will come from our offices. And the last is staff development, and that's the areas of staff development, professional and tech services. That's an area that our consultants, the resources that we use to help support professional learning across the district, and other services that we have, membership dues, things like that. Next slide. This is the major budget drivers in those areas that I just spoke to. So when we think about a curriculum implementation, there's 2 parts to that. There are the resources that help support the curriculum, and then there's the professional learning that helps drive that as well. So again, you'll see some of the themes from the last slides that I shared when I spoke earlier. PA Steels, our new science curriculum, continuing our K-8 math implementation, certainly middle level humanities, and continued refinement in all of the curricular areas. Some of them are due at different times, and like I said earlier, we try to keep that on the cycle. Our major professional learning areas that we're trying to strengthen is professional learning communities. In the December CCOB meeting, I spoke about professional learning communities is a systematic response to learning at all levels to ensure learning. Along with that, as you've heard over the years, our multi-tiered systems of support. We work with the IU and then have some consultants to make sure we're scaling that and growing that, building our capacity. And then universal design for learning, which you may have heard in our comprehensive plan, which is knowing that kids learn different ways and being able to support that. Content specific, again, PA Steels, math, and other areas as well that I've been repeating. Also data software, there's 3 major data systems that school districts have, and they're costly. Many of these you've heard of. For example, data warehousing and analytics. Recently, we've purchased and used Linkit, which are going to help drive our data presentations, using data to inform instruction and our analytics. Our information system, you all probably heard of, which is PowerSchool, when you want to check your grades and attendance and all of those things. And then a learning management system that we've adopted a few years ago, which was Schoology. So they're the major drivers in that area. Next slide.
Thank you. So this is health services. Again, we'll point out salary and benefits is the largest portion of this. These are our certified school nurses, as well as our staff nurses who provide support to schools. And then the other objects include the 300s are professional services. Those are your contracted services. We have a physician that helps support needs within the district, so that's like an independent contract. A dentist that helps support with some mandated services as well. And it also includes agency support. We need additional support to be able to meet the needs of students, and so we have several contracts with agencies for additional support with nursing staff. So that's included within that. And then you'll see supplies, which we'll talk a little bit about to help support the needs within our health services suites. For health services, these are direct services and supports for not just our district schools, but we're also required by PA code to provide a certain level of support for non-public schools. And so in this area, we have a high number of non-public schools, which increases the need to which that we have to provide those services. We're also bound by Department of Health mandates that we have to follow. There's also requirements per PA school code that we have to follow. When we talked about the federal and state mandates for students with disabilities, that also impacts health services as well. We do have students that have medical needs related to their disability that's addressed through health services. Services for our non-public schools, and crisis and emergency response. So just like our counselors and our clinical team members, our nurses are also really instrumental in being part of crisis and emergency response. So these are critical team members as well. For some of these, again, I referenced the additional support for the salaries. In addition to the annual salaries, we do need support during our summer programs, during extracurricular activities. So that additional support through our staff is reflected within that. I've mentioned already our physician, which is around $19,000. Our dentist is $5,000, and those additional health services. So again, in order to meet the needs of our students, we often need to use agency support. That is includes not just if we have staffing positions that we can't fill, that we need to use agency support for backfills. We are often short, in fact, we are always short on staff nurses in particular, and so we need to use agencies to help support with that backfill to make sure all of our student needs are met. But we also have to address needs for transportations. If students need a nurse during transport, we often use agency support for that. We have students who need a one-to-one nurse with them all the time. That is reflected within our purchase professional services. And then we also have to, if students have needs that require skilled nursing and health services, we have to provide that support for athletics, extracurriculars, and field trips. So this is just shy of $500,000, $490,000 for the 25-26 school year that we're projecting to need for those additional services. And then the supplies include what you would think of in your health services suite: first aid, emergency supplies, general supplies, mandated screenings, your AED, supplies as well, and that's just slightly over $80,000 for supplies.
Okay, I feel like I'm the closer in this presentation. So back to me to talk about this slide in particular, which connects to some conversations we've been having in the policy committee around student activities and athletics. And not unlike most like districts and districts nearby, I think it's a point of pride of Lower Merion School District that we offer a number of diverse activities for students to engage in across all of our schools. And like, I'll echo some of the comments I made about the organization itself. The business of offering activities and athletics isn't just about finding a coach or a sponsor. It's about all of the other details, logistical details, scheduling, games, practices, opportunities for events to occur, plays, concerts, et cetera. So there is quite a lot of organizational support that goes into offering a wide array of activities and athletics for our students, but it's something we very much feel it's an important investment. We believe it connects to engagement of students with schools, with their peers, and with their community. And just if you look at our website, it often highlights those moments for our students when they are exploring their passions and finding joy and things outside of a phone or device, which is particularly a nice thing to see. So we see here what the costs are. Largely, like many of the other areas we've discussed today, are in salaries and benefits, which are those sponsors and coaches that support this work, largely outside of the school day. And then you see the other types of costs that are associated with, again, things such as uniforms, props, concert venues, transportation, et cetera. So there are, again, a point of pride for us and a cost that is, I think, well worth the investment for our students.
So that concludes this presentation. We have one more Finance Committee scheduled on May 16th, which will talk further about our reserves, our fund balance, a cap reserve, and any other outstanding issues at that point in time. And I guess we'll open up to questions next.
Yeah, any questions from board members, or do we have any board members online too, do you know? Jason? Okay. So we'll go with board first and then the community. Kim?
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to confirm that the $5 million shortfall, that's the total shortfall, or we may anticipate there being more?
That's what we anticipate right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. I was wondering on slide 16, because I know that the food, it's not a big cost, but the $2,000 for food. Now, I know that the way it works, it's its own business and supports itself with our nutrition services, but what is the $2,000 for foods? I'm just curious.
No, so what that is sometimes there will be some programs that happen through the school year. So there may be a speaker comes in and talks over lunch, so the children don't have time to go to the cafeteria and get their lunch. So we will provide the lunch for the students.
Okay. And then the other question I have, it was just, I'm trying to understand this better, under the special services. You were talking about the tuition, and then you were saying, I thought the way it worked with the tuition, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when a student goes to a charter school, they factor in how much it takes for us to educate a student, and if it's a special ed, and that cost is what we pay the charter school. So I thought that amount would include services like supports and things but we're paying that additionally to the charter schools, or are we,
That number that that I mentioned was the cost that we pay to the charter schools. You can assume that that includes the services that they provide.
Okay.
And the total cost that we pay is based on our expenditures as well, which we can probably explain a little bit.
So what it
better.
is, that there is a state formula that you have to fill out. You take the prior year of your budget in ADMs, there's a formula that's calculated. Every school has to put their own data in, and then it generates a tuition rate. So for example, this year there was a slight change, so for brick and mortar, and I don't know exactly, we have brick and mortar, we have cyber, so there's two different tuition rates. A brick and mortar is just under $65,000, and it's about $55,000 for a cyber student to go to, a special needs students to go. So every month we get a bill, and you see on the list of bills all those different charter schools, so it's got regular and special ed, and every month we pay into the charter school, and then there's a reconciliation that is done after the school year. We do a reconciliation as to, because students go in and out all the time, and whether or not we owe them more money, they sometimes owe us money back, so that's how it kind of works. There is legislation right now, hopefully, if it goes through, and this has been talked about for years, that hopefully there'll be some type of charter reform, and I think Dr. Mussolini talked last month, a few months ago, about the Auditor General reports. Hopefully there's some movement, because it's expensive.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And then, so the related services are encompassed in that, they're not additional to that.
Correct. The only thing
Okay,
be different is if a brick and mortar student goes, we pay for transportation services, which is not included.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Real quick, one, thank you very much. I thought it was a really thoughtful and well-developed presentation. It's a lot of difficult things to walk through, and I think you did it in a really clear way. I can't wait to get to, and this is a weird can't wait, but to the capital reserve to talk about tariffs, and if that does have effect on that budget. Well, we'll save that for the 16th. Kimberly, just to clarify for me, when we talk about we are legally mandated to meet special ed needs, there's a range in there, though. And so, I just want you to clarify that we're not just mandated, we're legally mandated to meet special ed needs, but that range is appropriate? Give me the box that goes in.
Well, so every student's individual, right? So we have some students that might only need speech and language services, right? So they might have an articulation need, and it might just be a weekly speech session to meet what their needs are. And then you might have more extents that might range to a student who needs more direct special education support, a one-to-one aid, additional supports with related services that we talked about. So every student behind those numbers has a really individual level of support that's required. We have a high number of our students who receive supports at the itinerant level, which is the most time in general education. We're proud of that. It does require supports and services to make that successful for students.
And those supports and services are fair and appropriate level.
Exactly, based on those individual student needs.
Thank you.
We have any online comments?
Jason
has a comment?
Mr. Herman's in the,
No, I don't have any comments. I appreciate the presentation. I've just been listening, so I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
okay, we do have a question. Rebecca Brodsky of Ardmore, is the employer retirement contribution rate of 34% the same rate from last year? Is the rate applied to all teachers, or is there a range from newly hired to tenured teachers?
So the current year rate is 33.9%. Every employee that qualifies under the PSERS, whether a teacher, support person, administrator, it's the same. The current year is 33.9%.
You don't have, is it the same? I think that part of that question was, is it the same as last year? Do you know?
It was the Peter's contribution.
It's
Sorry.
0.1% difference, so
Okay.
33.9.
Yeah, it's 33.9 this year, next year is 34%, it's going like, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn and reconvene. Oh, if we've got community sorry, didn't realize, thought we. No, I didn't realize we had any. So, yeah, please, Tanya.
Sorry. I forgot to sign in, I'm sorry. Sorry, my name's Tanya Schreiber. I live in Penwyn, and thank you for the time. I was wondering, I guess, first of all, when it comes to the placements, is the number that you listed, are those the children currently placed in approved public schools? And then, so I believe it's approved public schools, is that first number? And then I'm guessing the cyber charter kids, you said were 16?
So are you looking on this?
The
No,
other one.
The other slide.
The one where the 55
So
children.
The 55 children does not include the charter school because we don't place in the charter school. These 55 students are ones that are placed in out-of-district placements by their IEP team. So it's IEP teams that have determined that they need an out-of-district placement. It might be intermediate unit programs. It might be approved private schools. Again, that 55 just depends on what that individual student needs.
Okay, so those are the 55 children that are currently still covered under FAPE, all 55, through the school district, and we're responsible for still managing their education and their IEPs.
That is correct.
Okay. The second thing is I was wondering, or I guess just a suggestion more than a wondering, there was a report at the curriculum meeting September 9th, 2021. It was a special education audit where they had suggestions about how they could bring in MCIU. The suggestion was to bring in MCIU, and they thought there were opportunities to both increase the time to response, empower the schools, and serve the children more quickly by restructuring things so that they could strengthen the training around the achievement teams. And it sounds like that might be a win-win. I know there was a lot going on with COVID, but that September 2021 report and the suggestion of bringing in an outside set of eyes to better serve the special ed kids and reduce expenses by kind of addressing their needs more quickly was a very, very informative report. And I think that if there's an opportunity, especially during times of financial challenge, to use it, I think it's something that should be pulled out and revisited. Thank you.
Would you mind just, if you mind if Kimberly just answers that too? Because I think you've done some work, and then I just have a second follow-up about how the MCI works. It doesn't, but you go first.
So in particular to that particular recommendation, you have since that report heard us talk a lot about multi-tiered systems of support. And we did that work in transitioning to that in partnership with outside entities. And the intention of that is really looking at what your different layers of support are and providing tier 1 intervention supports that hopefully reduce the number of students that then require special education services. So in partnership with our curriculum and instruction department and the work that they've done with multi-tiered systems of support, we have been responsive to that recommendation.
And since that report, because I agree with you, I really did like that report. Since that report, you've brought in MCIU to do trainings and have worked with them, and like projects like PATAN, which allows your general ed teachers to be able to like really assess the needs. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, we partner with those agencies, and again, they do a lot of good work with like professional learning and supporting with need areas. So we partner with both PATAN. Boy, if I'm going to be able to remember their acronym, it's like the Pennsylvania, it's like technical training. If anyone else is better than me. Network. Okay, great.
But they don't replace classroom instruction.
They do not.
Support. What they would do is redirect educators within the classroom to better achieve the needs to reduce expenses of special ed teachers.
Correct, it's consultative and training support.
So, got it. And then my last question on that, you are also bringing them in or another outside entity just to talk about like this positive watchdog, not a negative watchdog, a positive one, when we look at the special ed 520, I'm going to get the number wrong.
236.
236, thank you. 236, so that idea of, in that report, said to bring in outsiders to look at our stuff to make sure we're doing it right. And you're bringing an outside entity in to review the policy 236 to also kind of continue with this work to kind of negate any issues that could
That
come.
consultative support.
Great, wonderful, sorry.
So are they going to be at the policy meeting where 236 is discussed, the consultative group?
We'll
Or
find
is the
out.
public going to have an opportunity to
Yeah.
engage directly in a public meeting
Yes.
with those outside advisors?
We'll get you more of the information on that. I just don't want to divert too much from the budget, but that's a
No
great
problem.
question and we can talk about it, but we're definitely having a public meeting on it.
Excellent, thank you.
I think we're good now? All right, thanks, everyone. We'll reconvene next month. Happy Friday.